Echo of Death, a Tom and Scott mystery, fifth book in the series. By Mark Richard Zubro, publisher, St. Martin's Press, New York, narrator, Eric Ost. Acknowledgements. For their kind help and patience, Barb D'Amato, Hugh Holton, Rick Paul, and Kathy Pekaiser Reed. Chapter 7. That was a complete fiasco, I said as we drove to the hotel. Rivals for their kids' affections. Scott shook his head. Oedipus would have had a field day, I said. As usual, we have a hell of a time finding a parking space around the hotel. On a Friday or Saturday night, you could drive around for hours before you found a space. At this hour on a Monday, the nearest illegal space was 2 blocks away. We took it. The lobby of our demented hotel was filled that afternoon with what looked like a transvestite convention. The last time I'd seen so many hairy legs under dresses was in a bar in Istanbul 5 years ago. Strangest gay bar I'd ever been in. On a table on one side of the lobby was a silver tea set with elegant blue china cups and real silverware. The crowd may have looked weird, but they murmured in low voices and sipped their beverages with as much propriety as you'd find at high tea with the Queen of England. Edna motioned us over. She wanted to know how much longer we planned to stay. We told her we'd settle the bill now. Convention in town, I asked her. It's their day off. I give the boys a little late afternoon buffet every Monday. Not the kind of thing to advertise in the paper, but they like it. Been doing it for years. Good for business. Suddenly one of the partygoers gave a muffled screech. I saw one of them in a slinky red dress fanning herself with a well-manicured hand. A man in a leather pants led her over to the desk. Mandy needs help, he said. Mandy looked plaintively at Edna. Between comforting her and handling our checkout, Edna seemed to take forever. During all this, Bernie and Angelo made no comment. They simply accompanied us to our room. I wanted to get our few possessions and get out. As I swung open the door to the room, I glanced back into the hall. An old man, holding onto the arm of a young prostitute, tottered down the hall. The 4 of us were in the room, and I was closing the door when it burst out of my hand. Bernie and Angelo had their guns half out, but the old man stood with 2 very unpleasant-looking black holes staring at us from 2 very large guns. His companion had a very lethal-looking machine gun pointing out of her satchel. With a raspy voice, the old man said, "Drop your guns on the bed, gentlemen." Our bodyguards might have taken on the old man, but the machine gun was another matter. They put them on the bed. The woman wore a bright red dress, and she carried a black leather satchel over one shoulder. Her spiked heels must have been at least 6 inches high. When I looked closely at her face, I noted wisps of a mustache. I examined the man with the raspy voice. He had to be in his mid-70s, with a lush gray hair on the top of his head. In either hand he held a silencer-equipped gun, pointed at the 4 of us. Scott threw up. That the residue that hit the carpet did not disfigure it says a great deal about the state the floor covering was in. The guy with the machine gun moved out of the doorway to the bathroom. I tried to follow Scott inside, but the black hole at the end of the gun caught my movement and held me still. I heard Scott heave several more times, then I heard the swirl of water. Scott emerged several moments later, looking very white. He sat on the floor. "Who are you?" I asked. "Are you going to kill us?" Scott asked. He had rested his head against the wall. His paleness had deepened to green and a few spots on his face. He shivered and began to sweat. The old man pointed at Bernie and Angelo. "Tie them up." Minutes later, our guards were bound in torn sheets from the bed. All done, I thought. Someone else had entered the room, but it was a deep male voice coming from the person wearing the red dress. Our elder captor instructed us that we would leave the hotel, making no sudden movements. "If you attempt to escape," he said, "we will shoot you." I believed him. Outside, the guy in the red dress, who fit right in with the gang in the lobby, disappeared around the corner to the alley running alongside the building. Moments later, he returned driving a Ford Taurus with rental plates on it. The guy with the raspy voice directed us into the back seat of the car. Your friend is not well, the raspy voice said. You got that right, I said. Are we going to be alive or dead? Alive, probably. The old man looked back at us. He gave an almost impish grin. If I'd had the gun he was pointing at us, I'd have shot him. We crossed Halstead and continued west. This was a quiet residential street through the up and trendy DePaul area. Who are you? I asked again. I am Aquel Ramirez. This is my son Jose. We came to America to get our jewels back. The necklaces? I said. You know about them, Jose said. Yeah, I said. Why didn't you just ask? You're welcome to them. We weren't sure you had them, Jose said. He took off his hat and wig to reveal a brush haircut and flawlessly smooth skin. Not sure we had them, Scott croaked. Yeah, Jose said. You haven't been the easiest people to locate, and we couldn't find Proctor. He's dead, I said. I thought as much, Aquel said. Jose said, we knew he was coming to see you. He'd bragged about knowing him as Mr. Carpenter, the raid baseball player, and said he would visit you first. This was before he took the necklaces, or before we discovered them missing. It is my fault he knew about them, Aquel said. I was careless when I was working on them. I am old. I had to come here to correct my mistake. Those necklaces were special ordered and paid for already. We couldn't afford not to have them back. How did you find us? I asked. We were in the crowd outside the police station. We guessed about a rear exit. Jose followed you. He called me after you entered the factory complex. You followed us from there? Scott asked. Yes, back at the hotel, we were fortunate to find a closer illegal parking spot than you. While you settled your bill, Jose importuned a costume from an unlucky young man. Then we simply followed you upstairs. If you didn't kill Glenn, who did? His killers came from my country. They are probably Federico Torres, since Glenn told us he had information on him. Glenn told you? I asked. We've done business with his family for years. I remember him from when he was a child. The boy was a thief and a sneak even then. I never dreamed he'd steal from us. If that was Torres's crowd and they got hold of you and the necklaces, we would never have gotten them back. Where are the necklaces? Jose asked. Scott has one on, I said. The other is at the penthouse. We will go there immediately to retrieve it, Aquel said. It will be guarded and watched, I said. If not by the police, then certainly by those people who wanted to catch us. There have to be more people on the lookout. A smart person would have our place constantly under surveillance, assuming we'd have to come back sometime to get our stuff. This gave them pause for a minute. It would be nice to believe that they would take what they wanted and let us go. You also need the key to the penthouse, and you've got to get past the guard, I said. Why did you think Glenn would be dead? Scott asked. He talked like a fool, Jose said. He claimed he had a lead on a big drug shipment, but that he had the key to even more valuable riches in his hand. He claimed he knew something about drug safe houses in major cities in this country. Certainly there was one in Chicago who knows if what he found out was true or not. He also said he'd found the location of Federico Torres and was negotiating to get the reward, or trying to figure out a way to collect on the reward without the police of your country or mine getting it away from him. How did he find out? I asked. Jose shrugged. There are those like Glenn Proctor who seem to be able to stumble onto vast quantities of luck. They run con games on themselves, hoping the string of good fortune will renew itself constantly. They never understand when it runs thin. It is never their fault, and somehow, before they hit bottom, another miracle tumbles into their lap until finally the miracle crushes them. I was barely interested in their philosophizing, but extremely concerned about Scott and the possibilities of our surviving this encounter. How did he know about you and your dealing in jewels? I asked. His father and mother were both good customers, Aquel said. Much of our business is legitimate, but there are risks and occasionally problems arise. Glenn brought several of our precious stones across the border over the years. We'll take the necklace Mr. Carpenter has, Jose said. He lifted the gun in our direction. Now. Scott reached behind his neck, unhooked the clasp, and handed over the gleaming bauble. Did he tell you how much this was worth? Jose asked. I wasn't interested, I said. $500,000 at least, Jose said. It can't be, Scott said. Why would he give us such a valuable thing? Some of the color had returned to his face. Perhaps because he would be making a great deal more from revealing the location of Mr. Torres. Aquel said, he is a much wanted man. Or maybe he was too stupid to realize the value, I said. You were not fond of Glenn Proctor, Jose said. Not much, I said. They spoke in Spanish between themselves for several minutes. Then Jose turned back to us. We're going to your apartment. He began to don his wig. You will give me the key. We will enter the lobby, go upstairs, and come back together. The doorman won't recognize you, I said. Aquel said, You will convince him it is safe. I will keep a gun, trained at Mr. Carpenter's right temple. If there is a problem, I will kill him. I had no doubt he would. But won't anyone watching see me and attempt to talk to me or spot me and kill me? I asked. Why are they chasing you? Aquel asked. We don't know, I said. Sometimes they've tried to shoot to kill, sometimes just to capture us. It's totally nuts. Maybe they think Glenn gave you the information, Jose said. Did he? No! Aquel said. I don't know how badly they want you. They must think you know or have something. Why doesn't Torres just move? Scott asked. Why all this chasing around trying to kill Glenn and us? If the big problem is hiding the guy, why not just move? You'll have to ask them, Aquel said. I'd rather not, I said. We drove in silence for a few minutes. Something had been bothering me about these two, and finally it dawned on me. Neither one of you has much of an accent, I said. Would you feel more comfortable if we talked like ignorant peasants, just learning English? Aquel found a parking space a half block away from the penthouse. Jose and I got out. I could get killed by the people chasing us, I said. Aquel leaned over and spoke through the opening passenger side door. That would create a further diversion for Jose to enter your penthouse and get the necklace. I mean no harm to you, Tom Mason, but I must have my jewelry. It is simply business. And in case you were thinking of alerting the police, Jose has a little device on his person that signals to a little device in my pocket that all is not well. If for any reason that goes off, your partner is dead. The side street was devoid of passers-by who might look suspiciously at Scott edging into the front seat of the rental car. Aquel had held the gun in his left hand, away from Scott. He would be ambidextrous. Jose adjusted his skirt, gave his wig a final pat, and we marched down the street. I had to admit he was good. His movements and mannerisms rivaled Jay Davidson in The Crying Game. The walk to the penthouse was pleasantly uneventful. I didn't know whether or not I was comforted by the fact that Jose had not removed the machine gun from the gigantic purse he carried. I saw little point in thinking of ways to escape from Jose. One push of a button and Scott would be dead. I desperately wanted Jose to succeed. My legs wobbled a bit as we strode through the entryway. Howard saw me and his hand reached for the phone. Jose grabbed Howard's arm. You don't need to be calling anybody, Jose said, and let the tip of his machine gun peep out of his purse. Howard licked his lips and shook his head. Jose smiled. He pointed at me. You stay down here and keep an eye on Howard's arm. You might even ask him what he knows, since he seemed so eager to call someone as soon as he saw you. If everything is not in order, then I return you two, and Mr. Carpenter will die. Jose turned on his spike heels and marched to the elevator. Who was that? Howard asked. You let somebody into the penthouse Saturday, I said. No, never. Who were you going to call just now? A friend. No one you know. How did they get to you? I asked. You know they're trying to kill us. How could you turn us in? Howard drew himself up straight and glared to one side of my head. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. I couldn't get anything else out of him. Jose returned moments later with an enormous smile on his face. He walked behind the counter, ripped out the phone, and then smashed the butt of his machine gun into the console. There was a small piff, and the computer screens went blank. I can kill you too, Jose told Howard. Howard held up his hands in the Old West pose of being arrested. Then Jose put his arm through mine, and we walked out the building, comfortably linked together. You got it? I asked. It was just where you said it would be. Lucky for you. We strolled casually into the October early evening, around the corner of the building, crossed the street, and sauntered toward the car. Seemingly, a man and woman connected against the early winter chill. Walking toward us were two women dressed in sensible Republican clothes. Coats open to reveal black skirts cut just below the knee. White blouses peeked out of beige V-neck sweaters. We passed them. When we were about 2 feet from the car door, I saw Scott begin to raise the door handle. Aquil's gun rose from the front seat. "You gotta let us go," I said. "That is up to my father," Jose said. He motioned with his purse for me to get in. Aquil had his gun pointed at Scott's head, but I thought that if I got back in that car, both of us would be dead. They couldn't just shoot us here. While not crowded, cars were going past, and people were strolling about nearby. They'd have to take us somewhere to kill us. "Get in," Jose commanded. When I hesitated, I didn't want to see Scott's blood and brains scattered all over the pavement, mixed with my own. The barrel of the machine gun poked over the edge of the purse into the small of my back as he held the gun door open. "Could you help me, miss?" It was one of the women we just passed. She was tugging at the edge of Jose's purse. The woman must have been in her late 40s or early 50s. Her companion was about 5 feet behind her, looking bewildered and lost. "We just had a drink over on Rush Street, and we're trying to get back to Oak Street, but we must have turned the wrong way." "Get out of here, lady," Jose said. The other woman came close. "Is that a gun?" she asked, pointing into the interior of the car. Aquil lowered the gun for a second. Jose looked ready to belt the woman. I grabbed Scott's arm to yank him out of the car. But there wasn't much need. He'd seized the moment and was halfway out the door. "Drop it," one of the women ordered. A large gun appeared in her hands. I dove for the gun. Scott was right next to me as we tried scrambling away. I glanced back and saw Jose try to raise his weapon out of his purse. One of the women knocked it away. The glass of the car window shattered as bullets crashed through it. The women dropped to the ground, firing as they dodged. Jose jumped into the car. Seconds later, they roared away. Tires screeched as one car, a half block down, and one on the cross street, gave chase. I got up and dusted myself off. "Thank you. Who are you?" I asked. "Police," the woman in the black skirt said. The other pulled a radio out of her purse and spoke into it. She gave the license number and a description of the car to whoever was on the other end of the line. "Shots fired. Need some assistance? Here." "You guys okay?" the one who spoke first asked. "Yeah," I said. "You saved our lives." She shrugged. Several blue and white cop cars pulled up. People jumped out and slammed doors. Various cops began filling out forms, making sketches, and asking questions. Some concern was expressed about where the bullets had gone that Aquil had fired. They found two lodged in a dumpster in the alley next to us and one in the brick wall right next to it. Fortunately, they hadn't gone into any of the surrounding high-rises. The women told us that our building had been under surveillance. Jose and I had been spotted entering. They didn't know who she was, but as soon as I was spotted, pairs of cops had begun to converge on the building from 3 different directions. They didn't close in right away because they weren't sure what was happening or where Scott was. Before telling the rest of our story, we told the cops about Angelo and Bernie in the hotel. Calls were made and a couple of cops hopped in one car and streaked off. Eventually, we got permission to enter the penthouse, although a platoon of cops came with us. I didn't care. I felt secure with a horde of them in the living room. I took a shower and shaved in a still unreconstructed bathroom. Scott did the same. I let the warm water cascade over me, and I felt the heat sink into my tense muscles. Near the end, I began to shake from the memory of what had almost happened to us. I wrapped in a towel. I entered the bedroom. I was drawn to the picture of Scott and me that always sat on the end table on my side of the bed. He always slept on the right, nearest the door to the rest of the apartment. I always slept nearest the window. It was just the opposite when we spent nights at my place. I picked up the photo and gazed at it. It was a shot taken in St. Louis of the two of us smiling and laughing in front of an elephant we had just ridden on. The elephant had its trunk draped over one of Scott's shoulders, and my hand hung over his other, It was a goofy picture, but it was one of my favorites because it showed Scott and me enjoying life and each other. He looked beautiful and strong and sexy. I got misty-eyed and I heard Scott enter the room. He padded up behind me. I got tears in my eyes and pulled him close. "I never want to lose you," I said. "I love you so much," he said. With cops scattered around our living room, we didn't have time to linger. We dressed in faded blue jeans, white socks, running shoes, and sweatshirts. His from the University of Arizona, mine from UCLA. I had time to check the answer machine for messages. One was from Bill Proctor saying he had to meet us. The other was from Lester asking how things were going. I managed to get Proctor at his dad's estate. He wouldn't tell me what he wanted on the phone. I got the impression that he thought the phones might be tapped, or someone might be listening. As paranoid as his dad was, maybe his security included in-house surveillance. I was tired and I didn't want to meet, but he sounded desperate as he insisted. I didn't know how long we'd be tied up with the cops. He didn't want to come to the penthouse. We wrangled for a few minutes, but I finally agreed to call him when we finished with the cops. He told me he was leaving home then and gave me his car phone. I told him to be careful and that if for some reason he needed to get hold of me, he could call the answer machine and leave a message. The greeting on Lester's machine consisted of the first four notes of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. I told the tape on, "Call back." Back in the living room, we found that Belowski and Quinn had joined the crowd of cops. Scott and I sat together on the couch. Quinn said, "We need you to tell us exactly what happened." We told them the story. Before we started, the other cops had been dismissed, except two who were told to stay at the front door. "Why aren't you convinced we need protection? That something strange and horrible is going on?" I looked from one to the other. "We've got a few questions," Quinn said. "Nobody saw the body except you. We found no evidence of anything strange in the tunnels. Would they clean that well?" "It happened," I said. "You say Proctor was here and that he came from Mexico," Quinn continued. "And you say that according to this Brad Stolwalski and the necklace guys, Glenn had the addresses of a safe house for drug kingpins here in Chicago and maybe other cities." I nodded. Belowski stated the obvious. "We've got to talk to all three of these guys." He claimed he was only a guard for Glenn. I can't picture Glenn Proctor relying on Brad. Glenn had to be using him in some way. "I hope we find him alive to ask him," Quinn said. "Until then, we have to concentrate on what Glenn was doing. We have a record of him entering Mexico in late September from 12 days ago. No one has any idea of where he's been. We have had people hunting through computers working on airline records for an international flight coming into O'Hare. We can find no record of Glenn Proctor entering the country on any flight from anywhere, and that took a lot of hours of checking all the airlines." "Maybe he flew to another city, or maybe he didn't fly," I said. "At least under his own name." "Could he have entered the country some other way?" Scott asked. "Walked across the border?" "We're not sure about that," Quinn said. "And we have no way of checking every city in this country." He took a deep breath. "What did turn up in the records is that Scott Carpenter flew into Chicago on Air Mexico on Friday. He left from Acapulco, had a 2-hour stopover in Dallas to change planes, and then flew here. I've been here or at our cabin in Wisconsin since the end of the season," Scott said. "You'll have to prove that," Belowski said. "I've got all kinds of witnesses," Scott said. "I've been in the city, and people up around the cabin know me. It'll be real easy to establish that I was here." I said, "He's not the only guy named Scott Carpenter on the planet. Or Proctor could have been using his name." "We've interviewed the stewardesses on the flight," Quinn said. "They said this was a baseball player bragging about his accomplishments, demanding special attention and trying to get dates with 3 of them." "That proves it wasn't me," Scott said. "I wouldn't be trying to get a date with anybody, and if I was, it would be a steward." "Could have been a cover," Belowski said. "Did he look like me?" Scott asked. "They were blonde and muscular and blue-eyed," Quinn said. "I'm not built anything like Proctor," Scott said. "He was shorter by 3 inches. He was built more compact and beefier." "Fortunately, neither of you has committed a crime that we're sure of yet," Belowski said. "We just try to track down your story. Have you found out anything more about the shots that were fired Saturday morning? I asked. Absolutely nothing. No trace of the guys, no useful descriptions of them. The car they abandoned in the intersection after chasing you was stolen in Des Moines a week ago. Wait a second, Scott said. You can't just forget about Proctor using my name. Maybe that's why they're after us. Wouldn't he have to have a passport made out in Scott's name, I asked. Can he do that? How could he do that? It's possible, Quinn said. If he had a fake passport, then this isn't some spur-of-the-moment thing that he was involved in. I said, he's been doing illegal things for years, and this was probably only one of his covers. Scott looked miserable. We went around and round on the Glenn Proctor murder, the chase, through the tunnels, the shots outside of our building, and all the possible illegal things Glenn may have been into. The cops hadn't picked up a Quell, Jose, or Brad yet. This lapse did not boost my confidence in the Chicago Police Department. We spent a huge amount of time on the folderol that you must have something or know something that you don't know you have or think you have, and what could it be? We had no idea. Ultimately, it boiled down to the question I asked. What the hell are we supposed to do now? We obviously weren't safe. We certainly needed to come to some kind of terms with those after us, but we had no idea what those terms were or whether they could even be met. Glenn Proctor had involved us deeply in his illegal schemes, and I couldn't see any way out. My irritation with Scott for getting us into this seeped back into my consciousness. You need to understand, Quinn said. Your story sounds strange, but we found some stuff that bears out the theory that you're in danger, but we don't see any solution soon. The little scene outside this place gives a lot of credence to your story, but we eliminate no possibility until this is completely cleared up. This set off another drop in my confidence in the cops' competence. We need some assurance of our own safety, I said. Maybe you should try and hire more guards, Quinn suggested. That really worked last time, I said. Also, the Mexican authorities want to talk to you, Pawlowski said. Scott exploded. He jumped to his feet and flung his arms out. We don't know anything! He paced to the left, a few steps, then to the right, coming back to stand in front of the cops. We are innocent! We haven't done anything. They aren't going to accuse you or try to extradite you, Quinn said. They just want information. We've told you everything. If we knew any more, don't you think we'd have given it to you already? Scott asked. He walked to the window and pounded his fist against it hard enough to make it shake. We watched him in silence. This is total bullshit, he said to the expanse of buildings and sky outside. The intercom phone rang from downstairs. It was a cop asking for Quinn. Be careful, Scott said. Quinn frowned at him. He listened to the receiver for a minute, hung it up, and looked at us. It's your lawyer. A minute later, Todd Bristol, in his usual go-to-court lawyer's drag, swept into the apartment. It's on the radio, he said, that you were attacked, that the guards were captured. There is an army of reporters downstairs. What is going on? We told him. When we finished, he said, This is not credible. I said, Believe it, we were there. We're supposed to go meet the Mexican authorities, Scott said. I'll go with you, Todd said. It actually might be good to go talk to them. They might have some insight into who and what is going on. Can we do this now, today, and get it over with, I asked. Todd consulted with the cops and phone calls were made. Minutes later, we had an appointment to see a delegation at the Mexican consulate in the Prudential building in a couple of hours. Pawlowski and Quinn said they'd talked twice today with the same Mexican authorities. We would go without them. After they questioned Todd thoroughly about the guards, the firm they worked for, and Todd's connection with them, the cops got ready to leave. We're leaving with you, I said. I've arranged for more security guards, Todd said. That didn't work last time, although I think we should try it again, I said. To the police, I said, if you could come down to the parking garage with us, we'll get my truck. You can at least see us out of here safely. I realized that Lester's car was still parked near Hotel Chicago. Todd said he'd take care of it later. I gave him the keys. Can we drive directly to the security people? Scott asked. Let me make a call, Todd said. I don't want just two guys again, I said. We need an army. The cops agreed to wait while Todd called. He came back and said, It's all set. We can meet them at the office. Why not wait for them here? Scott asked. We're vulnerable here if the cops leave, I said. We took the elevator to the garage. I had the driver's side door open before Scott said, Shouldn't we have it checked for bombs? I dropped my hand from the door and left it open. How paranoid are we supposed to be? I asked. We can't hang around here forever, Quinn said. Call the bomb squad, Todd ordered. Bolowski didn't look happy at the sound of his command, but Quinn shrugged his shoulders. He used his radio to call in the request. Bolowski and Quinn agreed to wait until they arrived. The cops stood off to the side. Todd regaled us with thoughts on how to handle the press, who was after us, and what we could do. His suggestions on the last were not the most helpful. He just kept saying, Don't trust anyone. Don't leave the protection of the guards. Bolowski and Quinn left when the bomb squad showed. You could see your face in the gleaming black side of my truck with its oversized tires. It towered over much of the rest of traffic. It was probably the butchest thing I ever bought, not counting the complete leather outfit I gave Scott as a gift last Christmas. Watch the most beautiful blonde star pitcher in baseball put that on for the first time and turn you and gaze at you from under the brim of his leather cap. And you've got one turned-on hot puppy. The back of the pickup had served as one of our hottest ever lovemaking sessions. When we pulled off the road on a trip through North Dakota, we were near Sykeston on an unlit dirt road. Under a full moon, the entire Milky Way as our only witness. We lay in the back, on top of our tents, sleeping bags and mounds of camping gear. We made mad, passionate love. It was the first and only camping trip we ever took. The sleeping on the ground or on cots can be mildly romantic, but I'd done my stint as a kid and in the Marines. Scott was cured of his desire to inflict us on nature when he found a live rattlesnake that had crawled into his sleeping bag to cool off. That particular dash to the hospital had been the immediate cause for giving all our gear to a gay thrift shop. I thought the set of tools stored between the seat and near the rear of the truck's cab added a nice macho touch. Scott knew how to use all of them. I barely recognized one or two. A few minutes later, the bomb squad reported all clear on my truck and Scott's Porsche. Todd, Scott, and I clambered into the cab of the truck. I zigged and zagged through the early Monday evening traffic of Streeterville. As far as I could tell, nobody followed us. A Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.